This is a game that came out of the blue. Seriously, most people had no idea that Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2 was even coming. Then we got a trailer and it was like, hey, it's coming in like 2 weeks. It's here, I beat it, like 100% platinum trophy completed it, and I want to review it. If you haven't played it yet, just know that this review will have plenty of story and boss battle spoilers. I don't want to censor myself talking about this game. There's too much awesomeness to talk about. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to my Patreon page. If you'd like to help support the channel and allow me to continue creating content like this for all time, you can become a patron for as little as $1 a month by clicking on the link in the description below or heading over to patreon.com/GamerThumbTV. I'd also like to thank my current patrons and channel members for their continued support. As most people know, the Bloodstained series is a heavy throwback to classic Castlevania. Whereas Ritual of the Night was inspired by games like Symphony of the Night, Curse of the Moon was inspired by the classic 8-bit Castlevania adventures like Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse. And Curse of the Moon 2 is no different. It's a follow-up to Curse of the Moon in the same NES style. 2D challenging platforming at its finest, complete with returning characters and new ones. This time around, a mysterious tower rises that calls forth the demon's castle once again, and the badass demon-slaying swordsman Zangetsu sets out on a quest to vanquish evil. When you first start the game, it prompts you to choose between 2 different difficulty settings, casual or veteran. I wouldn't go as far as saying casual is necessarily easy, it still has a fair challenge, but on casual mode you have infinite lives and no knockback damage, a staple of these kind of games. On this channel, I will always recommend you challenge yourself by choosing veteran mode. If enemies hit you, they can knock you back, sending you plummeting into a pit, and lives are limited. If you lose them all, you go all the way back to the beginning of the stage. Checkpoints or no checkpoints. It's definitely not a playstyle for everyone, but it's my preferred way to play Curse of the Moon 2. It forces you to be more strategic and puts decisions in front of you like, do I jump to the platform now? But there's an enemy right there, and if I touch it, I'll bounce back, so maybe I should wait a second. With casual, you can be a little more careless because there's really no punishment for failing multiple times. Overall, the gameplay is fairly simple, like an NES game. There's a jump button, there's an attack button, sub-weapons, little magic jars you can collect that refill your sub-weapon use, and hearts that refill your health. There isn't really anything complicated in here, but as you go further into the game and unlock more characters, Curse of the Moon 2 does reveal itself to be much deeper. One important aspect to a game where there's multiple characters is encouraging you not to stick with just one, which is usually what I like to do. You can't really do that in Curse of the Moon 2, or more so, you shouldn't. Different situations had me switching between different characters, and that almost became a game on its own, figuring out who was best for what situation, and you could switch with the press of a button. Zangetsu is the more balanced character with close range sword. Dominique, a character returning from Ritual of the Night, I like to call the Eric Licard of this game since she has a spear, that gives her a bit more range, and she does have a bit less health. She also has the advantage of being able to strike upwards, which helps fight some of the bosses that float around in the air. But her most helpful advantage for me was the sub-weapon that allowed her to grow a plant to give you health. She became the healer of my party, and when one of my characters was low on health, that ability became crucial to success. Robert is an old war buddy of Zangetsu that's equipped with firearms, so he's the long-range fighter that has unlimited ammo, bullets that shoot all the way across the screen. At first I initially thought, oh, I'm going to use him for the whole game. He can kill everything, but the game does a great job making sure you don't rely only on one character. Robert's attacks are fairly weak and his health bar is really low. 2 to 3 hits and he's dead. But one of his special attacks allow him to use 2 guns quickly back to back. And finally, Hachi, possibly my favorite character to use. Hachi's a corgi, a small dog inside a magical suit of armor. It sounds completely ridiculous and I love it. His downside though is that he's very heavy, fairly slow characters I usually don't enjoy playing as. But he makes up for it in strength, and his special attack makes him invincible for a short time, a favorite move of mine during boss battles. Speaking of bosses, Curse of the Moon 2 delivers epic boss battles. Each one feels totally different from the previous one. The first boss is a big dragon that shoots fire from its mouth and a weird tail with a mouth that shoots lightning at you. The next boss is a pink floating moth lady. She's kind of annoying because every time I got near the end of her health bar, I was running on fumes. She has these little platforms you have to jump on before she gasses the floor, and the gas hurts you. Mind you, on your first run, these bosses are rather easy until later. I'll explain that soon. I'm not even sure how to describe the third boss, a train worm monster of some sort that has a Spartan warrior connected on top. It shoots fire and laser balls at you and it charges ahead full speed. Then a boss that will look familiar to anyone that played Ritual of the Night, it's the same boss you fought at the end of the ship section. And in the second phase, you have to hit the belly mouth while spikes threaten you, but luckily Hachi is the spike destroyer as well. They don't affect him, and he breaks spikes when he touches them. Where was he when I played Mega Man? Well, you know what? I destroyed the spikes, so you can suck it. There. Then a giant lava worm that was one of the more fun fights in the game, having to learn the patterns in which he zips around the screen and causes lava rocks to fall on you. One of my least favorite bosses was the big Pharaoh Tomb thing. It reminds me of that mummy from Darkstalkers, but it's one of those fights where you can't damage the boss from the bottom. You have to travel upwards to hit his head, which sure, you can use some sub-weapons to hit him, but once you're out, you have to wait for these columns to rise up and take you to him. Didn't care for this one. It felt a bit tedious, more so than being fun. And then Gremory, another returning boss character that has one of the most hated attacks. This swarm of annoyance that just comes across the screen. I couldn't ever really figure out if there was a pattern or not, so I just tried to hit the boss over and over until she died, hoping I wouldn't run out of health first. In the next stage, the swarm returns to harass you throughout the level until the final boss of the game. Let me go ahead and put air quotes around final boss there for reasons that'll soon become apparent. First, there's another bug-like demon that's suspiciously easy for a final boss. He's got attacks that aren't too hard to avoid, but then in phase 2 it is quite different. This boss was a fair challenge. When I first fought it, I started out at lower health, I was running out of characters, again running on fumes, but as these bosses usually operate, they tend to have predictable patterns that you could learn after a couple tries. Hachi's invincibility move became a great asset here. When I whipped him out, it was guaranteed to give me a few free hits, and every single hit counts. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. The key was Hachi all along, see? About 3 hours after starting the game, it was beaten. Enjoy the ending, game over, right? Incorrect. With Bloodstained, that first ending is never the true ending, and beating the game on the first playthrough is really only the beginning of the game. With the demon's defeat, Dominique gets captured, and episode 2 unlocks, Unbreakable Bonds. With each episode that's unlocked, the game has some minor differences that significantly alter the experience. This is the definition of replayability, playing the same game over again, but it feeling somewhat different. The goal the second time around is to rescue Dominique from the demon's clutches, which means she's no longer part of your party. That's one character down, and what an important character to take away from you. The ability to heal other characters, gone. So you have to rely on the health you find in stages. Naturally, the game's a bit harder because of that, but the bosses have an added layer of challenge as well, typically adding more attacks to their arsenal. For example, the first boss now adds the ability to call down lightning from the sky and sets the floor on fire while retaining his original attacks too, something that completely threw me off guard the first time I tried to fight it. After playing through the entire thing again and slaying Gremory, you'll discover that the final boss is totally different this time. It's another demon now, which you may also recognize from Ritual of the Night. It's not too bad. You have to destroy each eyeball thing that shoots fireballs at you, and then the crystal in the middle of the chest that's holding Dominique, and there's 2 separate ways this encounter ends. Either you slay the beast and cut its arm off with the Soul Eraser sword that extinguishes both good and evil, sacrificing Dominique in the process, or if you collect the 3 secret swords, one hidden in each of the first 3 levels, and the 4th level Zangetsu can place all 3 of those swords on an altar and unlock the secret Zanmato sword, a new sword that can slay evil yet spare good souls. If you kill the final boss after collecting this secret weapon, which by the way, there's a trophy for both collecting the sword and beating the game with it, Zangetsu this time slices it right down the middle, rescuing Dominique and beating the game again. But no, yet another episode unlocks, this time episode X, Oath of Reunion. Zangetsu's comrades have fallen and the warrior stands alone, until all the characters from the first game pop up. This is the more classic mode where the roster goes back to the original Curse of the Moon. Zangetsu, Jeeble, Miriam, and Alfred. Let me go ahead and say that this is the mode that was the absolute hardest for me. Partially due to my own fault, I learned to rely heavily on Hachi and his short invincibility power. Now that Hachi wasn't available to me, I had to relearn how to survive in the game with stronger bosses and characters with different abilities. I already had my gameplay style set with all the new characters, now I had to throw that all out the window and start fresh. Proof that with each boss it's a great idea to find a character that works best for you and switch them up as needed instead of relying on one or the other. Surprisingly, Alfred played a vital role to my success, the character I liked playing the least as. His fire shield helped protect the others, and Jeevel's attack, throwing multiple bats at once, was great to shred boss health down quickly. The final boss in X mode is the same once again, but of course with different characters in play, it requires different tactics. At the end of this story, Dominique is firmly rescued, and your classic friends stand by your side. And saving Dominique unlocks a new secret cutscene where she explains that the source of the demons is still alive. Turns out they're coming from space, more specifically the moon. So Curse of the Moon 2 has become a sort of Curse of the Doom. Awesome. This is where the game shifts to be different again. This time you can pick the levels in whatever order you'd like, and you play it with specific allies along the way. Everyone's there with you eventually, the new characters and the old characters. After you beat each level one by one, an item unlocks that goes towards building a spaceship. Once you collect all those pieces, one of the most unexpected things happens. The game sends you into space, and it becomes a classic vertical space shooter. I was wiggling around in my seat excited when this happened. Vertical space shooters have always been some of my favorite video games since back in the arcade days, right alongside beat-em-ups. It was totally unexpected, and it's completely different than anything else in the game, and it's a welcome addition. Power-ups that you collect here add more weapons to the ship, and by the end of the stage, you're this deadly spacecraft spewing out a barrage of destruction at the space demon scum. It was so badass. At the end, in the style of DuckTales, you actually get to land on the moon and begin your final assault on the true demon headquarters. And they're throwing everything at you, but it's actually fairly easy because you have so much support with so many different characters, and there's also plenty of checkpoints. The true final boss is insane. It's this huge purple statue with a giant bleeding hole in the face. It's really bizarre. While two, I'm not even sure what to call them, demon rabbit skeleton arms attack on each side. The main focus is to concentrate on the face above you and hit that until it's dead. Once you succeed, the Earth is saved from the demon hordes. How our heroes are breathing on the moon, I do not know. But that's still not the end. There's also the final episode, Zangetsu mode. What you want to do is go to the moon before you have all the pieces of the ship ready to go. That way you're allowed to go alone as Zangetsu. Also a trophy. It might sound terrifying facing the last stage on the moon as a single character, but again, this mode is way easier than it sounds. There's so many checkpoints, and Zangetsu is pretty powerful. As long as you learn the final boss patterns, it shouldn't be a problem. It's the same boss, but now it's a completely different battle. More variety, once again. This time you have to fight each individual arm and damage it until one of your allies pops up to hold it back in a really cool scene. Then you climb them up one by one until you reach the top and are faced with the giant purple hole in the face statue again, alone and possibly with low health. But it shouldn't be an issue for a warrior as skilled as Zangetsu. Not only does he slice the demon in one, the entire moon gets sliced in half. Completely ridiculous and over the top. After this, yes, the game is mostly finished. To add even more replayability, you also get the option of replaying again as a single character of your choice, apart from Zangetsu. And you might have some trophies to clean it up, but playing as any other character besides Zangetsu on their own, there's no trophy for that. So not completely necessary, but it is cool that the game does give you that option. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2 is truly a game that rewards you for replaying it over and over, and it requires you to do so to get the most out of it. Some may call it tedious, but it's so much fun to play, I never minded repeating stages over and over, and they all felt different. There's a forest filled with creatures of the night, to lava-filled volcanoes that spew fireballs, castle ruins in the vein of Castlevania. No two stages feel the same. Playing it over and over again made me feel more accomplished the more my skills grew as I memorized the best ways to go about playing and which characters to use during which situations. And I almost forgot to mention the couch co-op 2-player mode. To be honest, I didn't even try it because I had no one else really interested in playing the game with me, and I was so focused on getting the platinum trophy, and there's no trophy for 2-player mode. But yes, there is a 2-player local co-op mode, but I'm sure it's just as fun and adds another layer of strategy having the second player involved. Curse of the Moon 2 is something truly special here, and I really hope it leads to a Ritual of the Night 2. In total, to complete it with a platinum trophy, it took me about 15 hours or so, which is fine for a game that's $14.99. Basically, I paid $1 per hour. So I definitely got my money's worth. Leave me your thoughts down below. If you played this game, were you able to unlock all the different episodes? And which of those episodes was your favorite? I'll catch you guys later. Since you made it to the end of this video, I assume you enjoyed it, so why don't you go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss any new content. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, links in the description below, and if you'd like to support the channel, you can join my Patreon or become a channel member. This is Fabian, I love you guys, and I'll see you next time.